today's webinar called Prospect Research 2.0. Our speaker today is Rachel DeCarian from Drake University, and we're happy to have her back for part 2 of her presentation. That was right before Christmas, wasn't it? Doesn't seem that long ago. Just a couple of reminders today that any questions that you have, go ahead if you're here on webinar, type those in and we'll get to those at the very end of the session. Rachel will go through, she'll do the presentation, and then tomorrow, or at the very latest Monday, everyone in attendance will get a link to go see the presentation. You can hear it out on our YouTube channel, and you'll also get a link to all of the presentation slides. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rachel and Prospect Research 2.0.
Thanks so much. Afternoon, everybody here in the room and out there in internet land. As was explained, this is the 2.0 version of the Prospect Research Tips and Tricks presentation that I did earlier in December. So my goal for today is that if you were present for that earlier presentation, you're going to have some augmented and deeper information presented today. And if you weren't able to attend, you're still going to be able to get the basics, and you just have the benefit of some extra content. So for those of you that were here for the first presentation, I'm hopeful that for any information that's repeated, it's just good to hear things multiple times, and then hopefully make you more familiar with best practice. And then any and all new information is up for questions. So I say we just get started. Oh. I can get my clicker to work. I can. Okay, great. So a quick definition of prospect research. I belong to APRA, and this is our ethics statement. That's our professional association. And really what we're doing is balancing an individual, your donor, your stakeholder, your board member, whomever it is that you're researching, their right to privacy with the needs of your organization to collect, analyze, record, maintain, use, and disseminate information. And I'm going to highlight disseminate just because I think it's important to keep in mind that you assess your organization's own needs for what communications look like when they're kept internal and confidential, and what it looks like when you share donor information externally. Some of the information that we're going to be covering today will be appropriate for building out a donor or a board member bio, and that's obviously something that's wonderful to stick into a press release or have up on your website. But information about total giving or annual giving might be something that you would ask the donor whether or not you are going to have their permission to share that information before you do so. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I build my work, and I'm hopeful that you will carry forward this best practice of thinking not only about your donor's affinity, will they give, but their capacity, can they give? So there's a difference. We consider affinity to be evidenced by actions. So affinity can be determined based on volunteer service, social media posting, whether or not they show up to your events. If you happen to be a museum or an arts organization where you're able to gauge how often a certain donor or prospect is engaging with your content based on ticket sales or some other information, all of that is hopefully being tracked in your database or through your records. Really hopeful that everybody is is done with the paper filing system, but that's all right. You're still in that place, but a unique identifier so that you're tracking those folks and you're keeping your eye on the ball with data integrity. So what we're going to focus a majority of our time on today is capacity. I would say the bulk of my work and a majority of what I'm hoping to share with you today is giving you the basic wherewithal for determining capacity. Should you be going after this donor for an annual gift of $1,000, or should you be asking them for $10,000? So here's a helpful matrix. Again, if you were a part of the first presentation, you've seen this before. And as Elaine explained, all of this is going to be available. So if you have art skills and feel like you can scribble this down, go right ahead, but don't feel the need to. Taking you back to junior high math, X and Y axes. So what you're really looking for are the VIPs. You want to find folks that have high affinity and high capacity, and once you know that they are a VIP, you are going to want to either quarterly or annually update what you have their capacity at to verify that they are still in that category. And then sort of switching gears, the opposite of a VIP, and you will run across these folks a lot, are folks that are not a prospect. So everybody loves it when either their director of development or their executive director or one of their fundraisers comes in and says, Warren Buffett. So how come Warren Buffett hasn't given us any money? He's a nice Midwestern guy. He supported Iowa organizations before. Well, he obviously doesn't have low capacity, but he's probably got low affinity. So we're going to move him over into long shot. And then we've got a fan. Your fans are the folks that are your top volunteers. They might be the ones who go out and solicit sponsorships for annual events. These are the people that you can almost consider to be de facto staff, and you can deploy them in a lot of ways that is much more similar to fundraising as opposed to fundraising, and they're extremely valuable. But a majority of philanthropy, the above and beyond, that's going to be coming from those VIPs, people that care about your mission and also have the ability to bring transformative change through principal gifts. So gathering data and tracking data, these two things need to exist simultaneously for you to actually have a useful research component to your fundraising shop. You can gather all of the data in the world, but it doesn't help you if you have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to go solicit Jane, the donor, right? Where does she live again? What was her mailing address? How much did we ask her for last year? Data integrity, forever and always. So when you're gathering data, you should be asking yourself, what do our prospects look like? Your past is a snapshot in that people who have donated to you before, people who were donating and then became lapsed are folks that you should be tracking. You should know what it means when somebody falls off of your donor rolls. If it's expected, that's one thing. They're having some issues with their company, they're going through a divorce, they're either holding off until stock X reaches whatever, and then when they've reached that potential threshold, they'll sell those shares and those proceeds will go to you. Whatever it is, you need to make sure that you understand where you've been so that you know where you're going. And a lot of this information, if you happen to be walking into the middle of something, will hopefully be contained in your organization's annual reports. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked at my shop at Drake to put together a donor profile, and a quarter before or 6 months before we did a donor profile in our Drake Blue magazine, and that just wasn't imaged into our database. And so I could have reinvented the wheel and spent a half an hour writing a very nice narrative about this donor, or I could have just said, here's the link, please put this in the database. So make sure that you're keeping track of your own publications and all of the information that's coming out of your own organization. Same thing goes with volunteer history. Your events are one of the most impactful ways that you can find prospects. People will come to your events and essentially feel you out. They will see how you're talking about donors, what the room feels like, whether folks are feeling positive about the philanthropy at your organization, and sometimes they're making essentially a guest appearance, and you've got to follow that up with, it was so good to see you, here's the contact information for our development officer, reach out to those folks. Pay attention to who is attending your events, who's showing up and signing up on your sign-up sheets, and reach out to those people. To put a finer point on that, I think a peer screening with your board is one of the best ways to gather data. You wouldn't believe how much your board members know about donors and potential donors that they assume you know, that they assume your organization knows. Even if you feel like you have stellar records and everybody on the board knows everything about each other, you would be surprised to know that, oh yeah, absolutely, I see Rachel DeCarian every time in Naples. We snowbird together. You had no idea that Rachel had a home in Naples, and now that means that based on how much real estate she has, you can start asking her for maybe 10 times the amount of money. Or maybe you're going to start including her on your Naples annual event if you happen to have the ability to have regional events. So when you're tracking data, you're going to be looking for patterns. And on a macro level, researchers are looking for patterns in terms of the best types of donors, the best prospects. Like I was just saying earlier, vacation homes, seasonal homes, second, third homes, any sort of real estate that's a property investment is a red flag for, hey, this person is probably going to have the capacity to be a transformative donor for you. And so that doubles back around to you need to be strategic with your information. You need to be tracking those addresses when you find them. Not only because you need to be able to contact folks, but when they eventually sell those properties, you're going to know what they just liquidated. They're suddenly $235,000 more cash in their current portfolio than you expected. And then contact information and family relationships. Not only is tracking family relationships important in case you want to solicit an entire family for an honorary gift, maybe the matriarch or the patriarch of their family was a very loyal donor to you, and then you want to make sure that that donor is honored and you want everyone in the family to be included. It's very hard to ensure that all of the siblings are included if you don't know who they are. So I'm calling the internet the secret Google because based on how you build search strings and how you approach Google, I have been met with many frustrated fundraisers who say, I'm Googling the same name as you. How are you getting different information? And it's all based on the search string and understanding what it is exactly that you're looking for. It would be really nice if Google was more like Siri and you could just say, hey, is Rachel DeCarrion wealthy? And then you would just get a yes or no. But unfortunately, you're probably going to have to be more of a detective. So obituaries are great because obituaries help you build family history. They'll also point out affinities that may transfer to the rest of the family and not just the individual, because there's usually a place where you can direct memorial gifts. So to me, if my organization wasn't the organization that was being designated as the desired recipient for those memorial gifts, I sure as heck am going to be going to look at those annual fund reports for that other organization and seeing how much was being donated to that organization. Milestones, weddings, and birth announcements. Not only is this important because you want to track changes to your database, the data integrity issue, but you want to congratulate and thank your donors. You would be surprised to discover what sort of juicy prospect research information you get out of those communications. So for example, we had a Drake alum that recently got married, and so our alumni office sent a congratulations note, and he wrote back and said, thanks so much, now we're a dual alumni household because he married another alum. Can't wait to boat around the world together. Oh, he has a yacht. Ding, ding. You put that information in the database. So talk to your donors. It's amazing what they'll just tell you straight up. And then also pay attention to your local and regional most expensive homes, lists 40 under 40, anything that sort of elevates the profile of your potential donor. So tip, sort of going back to that search string comment, I always find that searching for name plus survived by gives me better hits for obits, particularly if we're talking about something that an obituary that isn't going to be listed on legacy.com and thus cross-posted on the Des Moines Register, any other local publication. So really, what you should be thinking about when you're using Google is, so say for example, you've got a hunch that your prospect or your donor should be showing up on their local most expensive homes list. It may not be called that. It may not be called the top 10 most expensive homes in Scottsdale, Arizona. What you could search for is Jane Doe, recently moved, landscaping, boathouse, any sort of buzzword that might appear in a more narrative fashion. So Google's going to be searching for hits in terms of content for, whatever the publication or blog post may be. So if you're trying to imagine the content that you're looking for, you should probably try and imagine what an example of one sentence or one blurb would be in that article or that piece of information. So social media, we're going to take a deeper dive into that in just a second. And I'm going to actually show you an example of that tip, how you can provide yourself or your frontline fundraisers with a fast fix donor profile by exporting a LinkedIn profile to PDF. So Facebook. I wanted to directly address this because I feel like I get the most questions about social media. People are very concerned about respecting folks' privacy settings and approaching social media in a way that is ethical while still also ensuring that you're capturing information that is vital to your organization. So the philosophy that I take on social media is if you are somebody who is savvy enough to have an account, I'm going to assume that you have sort of a generic baseline level understanding of security settings. So it's a little bit of laissez-faire combined with give folks the benefit of a doubt. What I'm showing here is the About section of my personal Facebook. I thought if we're going to be stalking anybody, it might as well be me. And I wanted to show you the areas that I'm most often looking at for folks' Facebook. So first of all, if you can't find them, you can't find them. That means that they've got their privacy settings really high. And I am logged in when I'm searching, mostly because that's more of a issue with the platform. Facebook makes it very hard for you to look at content that is public unless you yourself are logged in. Sometimes you can find it, and that's a question that I get a lot. I'm always logged in mostly because it means that your searching capability is stronger. But I go to the About section because sometimes you get content, particularly if they're not on LinkedIn, about work history, education, and all of those things are affinity indicators, especially if they're working for nonprofits. Seriously, go right out and find those annual find those annual reports. If there's an annual fund donor roll, you want to know whether or not they were giving to those organizations and what level they were giving at. Always keeping in mind that you may not find information because they may be giving anonymously. That happens. But sometimes what's really great is that you're searching for, you see Rachel Zakarian worked at the Iowa State University Foundation. So you're going to go to Iowa State's annual fund. And when you keyword search Zakarian, you don't find Rachel Zakarian, but you find the Zakarian Family Foundation is supporting a scholarship in the College of Human Sciences, right? Well, bam. Now you know that she has a family foundation. Go out to GuideStar, look at that 990, see what other organizations they support. And if that sounded like gobbledygook, don't worry. We're going to get to what GuideStar is and what 990s are in a second. So not only can you search in the Friends section by surname and hopefully build out the family. These are my lovely siblings and my mother. For the curious, my father is not on Facebook. And you can also search places that you've lived, contact info. You'd be surprised how many people put their cell phone for business reasons or what have you on their Facebook and you don't have it. And more, as I'm sure all of you have experienced, the landline is dying and you need to have cell phones or at least an email. And if push comes to shove, you can Facebook message them if you have no way of getting in touch. That works surprisingly well. So this is my boss. I thought you would be tired of staring at my face and my family's face for a while, so I asked Lauren if I could screen capture her LinkedIn profile. So when you find someone on LinkedIn, and hopefully there's enough content to make this process worthwhile, even though it's very short. You know, they've got their education background, their professional background, some of the places they volunteer, a nice headshot. Some folks will actually have a professional summary, and what they talk about in the professional summary, the places where they volunteer, all of those are going to be affinity indicators. And if you're not listed, don't worry. You need to be thinking about parallels. So maybe they don't know that your organization exists, right? But they gave to the Botanical Center in their hometown. Or they're not yet giving to the university where their kids go, but they give to their alma mater. That's fine. You know they care about higher ed. You know they care about arts and museums. You need to constantly be thinking about how you take this information that you're gathering and parlay it and leverage it into what a donor proposal would look like for this person coming from your organization. So sort of hidden on LinkedIn, next to that send a message button, I thought they were very clever about hiding it here. There's a little drop-down arrow. So you're not going to automatically send them a message. If you just hit the drop-down and scroll down to Save to PDF, it's going to immediately export the profile, and then you're going to have a donor profile that you can either upload into your own database, or I love my VP dearly, but he is notorious for popping into my office 15 minutes before he's got to go to lunch with somebody. And we are lucky enough at Drake to have Blackbaud Razor's Edge, which is very slick, and they have plenty of canned constituency reports. But he is a guy who loves the headshot and more concise information, and so I can't tell you the number of times that I've said, walk yourself over to the printer, here's the donor profile, enjoy your lunch. It's really great. All right, so continuing on with publicly available research resources on the internet, the Iowa Ethics and Campaign Disclosure Board is great because not only can you look at individuals giving, but you can look at recency. So you can determine how often they're giving to political candidates, what that amount is, and also some of the affinities. Go and look at candidates' platforms, and if you see that they're giving to somebody who cares about the environment and you're an environmental organization, I consider that a hit. You know that they have affinity. So the screen capture that I have for you here shows the most useful way that you can navigate the website, in my opinion. You're looking for contributions to committees that were made by an individual. And then I put my name in there just so that you can see what it looks like. You don't have to, I feel like a lot of folks kind of get tripped up by, is it going to work if I just have a first name and a last name, or what if I just have a surname, or even just an address? That'll work as well. Just anytime you're searching for something, see what pops out based on the information that you already have. So here's my giving. Sorry guys, I'm not going to be making a transformative $10,000 gift to the organization. I might give you $35 though. So this is a perfect example of what it means to gauge not only the recency and the frequency of a potential donor's giving, but also the monetary amount. And then you're going to know where to start them out. My particular political giving is not illustrative of this, but maybe one day it will be. But it would be interesting if you saw, you know, right after they got out of college, they were making $5, $10, $15, $20 contributions. And then more recently, they've been making 3-figure and 4-figure. That means that they're growing their capacity. They're able to make larger gifts, and maybe you don't have to start at the $5 and $10 small ask. Maybe you can just go straight for the grand. Moving on from state to federal, the FEC works the same way. You're going to be able to search by name. And then I just use as an example our former Lieutenant Governor Joy Corning. If I can get this to change. There we go. Remotes don't like me. I don't know what it is. So what I love about the FEC website is that unless you're really interested in the minutia, you can scroll all the way to the bottom where it shows total contributions. And this is a lot of information to put into your database, right? But it's really easy to say total political giving as of today's date is the amount listed by the FEC. And again, same way of navigating and analyzing the information. When was the last time that she gave? What is her political affiliation? What issues does she care about? And I will tell you, it is very interesting to see how there are patterns in giving based upon someone's chosen profession. It is a red flag for somebody being an entrepreneur or involved in the private sector, particularly if you know that the company is about to have their first IPO or go public. They're going to give to candidates of both parties because they're contributing for influence. The Notable Names Database is just another resource that I want you to be available, know is available. What's great about it is that you can search based on a few different criteria, movie titles being one of them, which I just think is kind of hilarious. But in our case, you can search the full text, so the full text of every profile available for the word Iowa, or for the word botanical, or for the word art museum, and see whether or not there might be particular patrons for your organization. This is obviously a place where you would go for local heavyweights, like the name that pops off the top of my head is John Papajohn. William Shatner is one that's in here for Iowa, and a few others. So SEC filings are hairier. These are the hardest, and I think you can engage with SEC forms on many different levels depending on what your needs are. Just having a hit is sign enough that this person is an insider or a director or owns 10% of a company. If you just want to search for somebody's name or search for a company just so you can look at who might be on their board of directors in case it's not publicly listed somewhere, this is useful to you. But if you want to take a deeper dive, like we're going to be doing in a second, I'm hopefully going to give you some tips for navigating. So I was looking for a former CEO of Callaway Golf named Tony Thornley. And so in searching his name, this was in the black box on the lower right-hand corner. These were my hits. And so one of two things here. I'm for sure going to try and determine if Evan Thornley and Tony Thornley are related, but I'm going to first click through on the CIK number because Anthony Thornley, Tony Thornley, that's a hit, so that's great. I know he has securities, which having securities of any kind is a wealth indicator. Depending on your level of sophistication, you could have a check mark on profiles that says Director of Public Company or Insider Trader, anything that's sort of a wealth indicator for you. So first of all, your new friend, if you are going to try and dive into SEC forms, is going to be Investopedia. It is the best. You can literally Google Investopedia how to read Form 4, and it will show you section by section. Or Investopedia, what does it mean to look at a 10K or a 10Q, K being annual, Q being quarterly, right? So what you're seeing directly underneath the Investopedia icon is an example of a Form 4. So this lets you know what securities, in Tony's case, we're looking at the acquisition and disposal of common stock. Again, Investopedia, what you're seeing there with the A and the D, acquiring or disposing of, the amount of shares, what they traded at for that day. They were for Callaway Golf. You can go to Yahoo Invest or any other stock tracking. If Google's fine. Yahoo's my favorite. I just like the way that it's laid out. You can see what it's currently trading at. But what I wanted to show you more expressly is that if you're looking at the 14A, so the proxy statements for a company, in this case, Callaway Golf, for the former CEO, Tony, it's interesting to see that he was also a director of the company at the time. So director compensation, shares, stock options, anything that's beneficial for a director or for folks that are in the C-suite is going to be listed in this form. So what I wanted to show you here is the way that you can begin to build a narrative, starting with the fact that you are searching the last name Thornley. Okay, Tony trades, that's great. Note for self later, find out who this Evan person is. Maybe that's a son or a brother or an uncle, or maybe it's just a completely random person that has the same last name. You don't know. You take the first SEC Form 4, which is going to indicate shareholdings, and look at the upper right-hand corner and see the little X next to director. So that's interesting. It's not just that he's an inside trader, but he's a director for this company, which you may not have previously known. And then you're going to go to the proxy statement, the 14A, and keyword search his last name to see the fees that were earned or paid in cash that particular year that he was a director, and realize that he made $75,000 cash, was awarded $50,000 worth of stock for a total compensation of $125,000. So if he also, I know, wouldn't it be nice? We just had some folks like roll eyes and sigh heavily. We're all in the nonprofit world. That would be nice. Here's your bonus. But now you know sort of what the amount might be for a possible philanthropic ask, particularly if you've been cultivating Tony for a while and might be able to ask for, I know that while you're on the board for Callaway, we have a general idea of what that compensation level might be. Would you consider creating some sort of fund or named chair or named program based on the proceeds that you make from that paid directorship? Okay, breathe sigh of relief. We're done with that. I know SEC forms are boring. So issue, ISSUU, is one of my favorite ways to search for annual reports and really any other type of publication that may not be publicly available or easily found in Google, or might be buried on the 4th or 5th page of a Google hit. So continuing on with Mr. Thornley, in that same proxy statement, and this is, again, typical of proxy statements, there's usually a little narrative, a little bio explaining directors, explaining executive leadership, and it mentions that he was a graduate of the University of Manchester. So most researchers will probably cringe a little bit when we're talking about foreign assets or philanthropy overseas, mostly because that's very, very difficult to find. A whole other conversation we could have about how robust the nonprofit sector is in the United States compared to Europe. But I immediately went to issue to see if there might be a chance that the University of Manchester has their annual reports published to this website, and they were. So I was able to click on that second hit that says Your Manchester Magazine, assuming that that was, their quarterly magazine, or there might be some annual fund reporting in there, and I was able to find out that Mr. Thornley had supported a chair that was named after his mother. So not only do I have family information now, but I also know that he cares about medical research and has the capacity to name a chair, which, again, in the narrative I discovered was created to provide a collaborative position between the University of Manchester and Harvard. So then again, you bet that I was looking at Harvard's annual report to see if there was any giving there from him as well. So really, this is all just about finding those breadcrumbs and following them through and connecting the dots. So real estate and farmland, we are in the Midwest. It all starts with an address, right? But any sort of hit whatsoever, owning property, particularly acres and acres of farmland or those second homes, those seasonal homes, those are indicators of capacity. So if you're just very quickly trying to find a way to highlight folks that are in your database, you can just pull based on people that have a second address or have a vacation home. County assessor websites are going to be your friends. We're going to do an in-depth look into how you can search assessor websites in a second. Christina Pulowski, a bit of a heavyweight in the prospect research world because she has aggregated links for all of the assessor websites nationwide. So usually you're going to have some familiarity with your statewide assessor websites, but then what do you do when you find out that there is a seasonal home in Georgia or that they own property in Alaska? Christina's database is there to help you. Zillow and Trulia, self-explanatory. They're going to let you know what an approximate current market value is for the home. Also let you know what zip code trends are. Zillow and Trulia, if you just go to the home page and search, put in a search string of top zip codes in the United States, most expensive zip codes in Iowa, that's going to give you information. And then you might pull records of donors that live in those zip codes and see whether or not you have any giving from them or if they're lapsed donors. ISU Extension gives an annual farmland value survey that you're going to use to value acres of farmland once you find from a county assessor's website that Rachel DeCarian owns 100 acres in Story County. I wish. And Then, if you're unable to find information on a county assessor website, because sometimes you are at the mercy of each individual county assessor, and some folks either want you to come in and look at the actual paper records, or there's nothing searchable online whatsoever, you can go to the Environmental Working Group Farm Subsidy Database, the EWG website, and see if they're getting federal farm subsidies. Unfortunately, that has ended as of 2013. It's not publicly reportable anymore. But if a farm has been in a family for the past 20, 10, 50 years, however long, you're going to be able to look at historical information. So when you search Iowa Assessors, or hard to remember, iowassessors.com, this is what you get. What I love about it is that you can toggle and look at assessors by county, by city. You can look at a map of the state, or if you look at the top bar from the screen capture, you can see that they've also got Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, and I think the Dakotas are up there as well. They were just cut off from the screen capture. So you can sort of toggle around to different assessors by region. So when you click through on Polk County, this is the Polk County Assessor's website. I am usually using the first two boxes. I'm either searching for the new owner or the historical sales of a house, or I'm looking to see what other additional properties might be owned by a particular donor. So again, Lauren, my boss, graciously, I asked her if I could show off her assessor website, her assessor records, and she agreed. Most of it because there are some interesting points here. So first of all, when you look down under ownership, I think it's interesting to note that Lauren and her husband, Dave, do not share a last name. So now you're going to know that you should probably connect those records after reaching out to Lauren and say, recently, we were notified, be generic, we were notified that you reside with a Mr. David Stone. Please reply and let us know that this person is in fact your spouse so we can connect your records. And donors are really gracious about this kind of stuff. They usually assume that you know, so when you reach back out to verify information, they'll say, oh yes, of course. So hopefully you are either gaining new information, you know that Lauren is married, you know the name of her spouse, but you can also correct your records if you happen to be sending mail to Mr. and Mrs. Dixon. Maybe that's why they're lapsed donors, because they don't like being referred to that way. They obviously took some care to not share a surname. So, and then not only are you able to look at the current ownership information, but you're going to be looking at sales history. So at the top, I have a screen capture of when you scroll down through that assessor's record, here's sales. You can see sale price, sale date, who previously bought the home. If you're beginning to wonder why mail is bouncing for Rachel DeCarian at 123 Main Street, search 123 Main Street and see when I sold the house, if I ever resided there, if it's actually never been held in my name. It was held in Generic Rentals Incorporated, so that was never my property in the first place. But then what's really great about being able to look down into the sales is that you're going to be able to determine market trends for the area. You're also going to be able to understand whether or not somebody was underwater on a home, whether the deed was a quitclaim deed, probably giving the home or the property over to a family member. If you see transactions of $0 or $1 on a quitclaim deed, you're probably looking at one family member gifting a home to another. And then just a screen capture of the home on Zillow where you can look at the market value compared to the assessed value compared to the sale price. Usually all three of those numbers are different. So this tax assessor database screen capture, this is just taken from Christina's website, and you can see all the links that have been clicked through because that's apparently where I'm looking. I guess Drake doesn't have any donors in Ohio or New Jersey. That's interesting. But then when you click through on these states, you get broken down by county, all the different assessor websites. And that's just Pulowski.net. If you search Christina Pulowski, it's PulowskiAssessor.com. Or as I'll cover later, all of this presentation is available in Prezi format, and there are hyperlinks in that as well. So you can just click through. Here's what the land value looks like from Iowa State. You can see the current year's valuation on top and the previous year's underneath. I think best practice is just to take the most current valuation. In my opinion, stretching and reaching for a higher amount, if that encourages your fundraisers to ask for more, that is not a bad thing. You are only going to, I'll soapbox for a little bit and say that, in my opinion, always ask for a little bit more, and if it's a stretch gift, don't worry. Your donor will probably be flattered that you think that they can give that much, and then they will just tell you what might be more doable for them. Or when they respond easy peasy, yeah, no problem, $100,000 gift, that's when you say, okay, well, I should have asked for more for next time. And then here's just a screen capture of the EWG Farm Database, and you'll notice that you can search by all sorts of different information. And this is really great, too, because if you are searching by city or by zip code or by recipient's last name, you're able to look at family holdings as well, or by business name. Sometimes this is another opportunity for you to be able to reverse engineer. If you've got a hunch that there is a farm that is held in a business name by one of your donors, and you've never been able to report that as a wealth asset before because you weren't quite sure what ownership percentage they had, this will actually show you a filing of 30% ownership interest to dad, 30% to mom, and then 30% to the kid or whatever. There'll be a name there. But that's an aspect of these filings that I love, as you can see ownership shares. So if you happen to be soliciting from corporations and foundations, or those corporations or foundations are connected to a constituent that you're looking at, you're going to go with the heavy hitters, mostly because they're going to have all sorts of interesting directorship, professional background, all that fun information. Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Week, very similar, much more narrative style. Sometimes that information can be out of date, so just pay attention to that. Manta.com sometimes will give you a pretty solid approximation of how many employees work at a given company and what their annual revenue is. I love Blastdoor. We'll take a look at what a screen capture is from that website. You're able to look at salaries. So say, for example, you know that one of your prospects is a first-year medical doctor at the Mayo Clinic. You can look and see at what other first-year MDs have reported as their starting salary for Mayo or Principal or DuPont or what have you. And then coming full circle on my commentary earlier about foundations, guidestar.org, you're going to need a username. You're going to need to log in to be able to look at a foundation's 990 tax returns. But it's completely worth it because you're going to be able to look at assets within the reporting tax year, how contributions were made to support the foundation, whether they're just drawing off of their endowment or if it's supported by certain family members who put in an amount of cash every year or if they share out stock. And then you're also going to be able to see where those funds are distributed because there is a mandatory amount that foundations have to give annually. So here's a look at Manta for Bozen. Not a lot of information, but in case the name Bozen the florist was throwing you, you definitely know that they're florists. Can't tell you how many times a company like Rachel Solutions, what does that mean? Go to Manta and then you'll be able to determine whether it's manufacturing or cosmetic surgery or a flower shop. So GuideStar, 990s, you can see when you're looking at the grants and contributions paid during the year, and you can download these 990 as a searchable PDF, so I would just keyword search grants or contributions to see what you find. You're going to be able to see the recipients, the address for the recipients, what the purpose or type of contribution was being made, and then the amount. These are really, really useful so for example, going back to Mr. Thornley, the Callaway Golf Company has Callaway Golf Foundation, and so obviously the board is probably going to be making a lot of those decisions And so you can sort of assume that there's going to be some sway of opinions there. So I was always checking to see if some of Mr. Thornley's personal affinity was being filtered through to Callaway. So here's Blastdoor. I just think this website is great. And you shouldn't take it as set in stone, but it's a really great way to ballpark whether or not your donor or your prospect is making a 5-figure salary or a 6-figure salary, or what they might be looking at making in year 2 or 3 of their position. So again, here's that Prezi that I mentioned. All of this information is covered in a 1.0 level in that in this presentation. But what I think is really going to be useful for you is the fact that there's hyperlinks. So this PowerPoint is great. Hopefully it gave you some visuals and some way of navigating. But if you're interested in getting to these platforms and sort of kicking around and trying out these resources for yourself, I sort of consider this Prezi to be a one-stop shop for all of those links. So I will happily take questions now. If anybody in the room has any questions, or Elaine is hopefully going to navigate questions for me.
I don't see any questions online.
There's no way I was that good, you guys.
Here, I'll throw a couple out to you, Rachel. So just an interesting kind of happening in the last few weeks. Rachel talked about, don't be afraid to kind of push the upper limits of what you ask the donor for. So we're working with a nonprofit in campaign mode, and we submitted the ask for people who are chairing this campaign. Had dinner with them, and one of the co-chairs looked at me and said, I got to just ask, where did you figure out what you were asking me to give? Holy cow. And I thought, wow. I said, so help me understand. Were we on the mark? Holy cow, no. He goes, where'd you come up with that? I said, remember, it's just a number. And we've looked at lots of information, but in the end, it comes down to what you and your wife ultimately want to do in support of this particular campaign. Then I had to laugh because 2 days later, their pledge came in, and it was 50% more than what I asked for. So you never know, as Rachel said, whether to push that or how much to push. But generally speaking, I would agree that most people are flattered that you think they could make a gift in that particular arena. And if they can't, they're going to bring it down to their comfort zone. If they can, they might just look at that and say, maybe I'll do just a little more because of that. So I found that to be pretty interesting. The other question I have for you is, in some situations, there are people who make pledges to campaigns in support of things, but they are matched by their company.
Yeah.
And in some softwares, they may show that Scott and Sue McEntee pledged $10,000, but we only paid $5,000, and my company paid the other $5,000. How do you know if there's been any kind of a pledge match there?
Sure. Well, that's where it comes down to everybody's individual shops, hopefully having a helpful accounting or a records department. Like I said, we're lucky enough at Drake to essentially have the Cadillac of fundraising databases. And in Razor's Edge, you're able to see, based on one pledge, so say, for example, the pledge is $10,000, and $5,000 came from, and then the other $5,000 came from soft credited to them. So in Razor's Edge, it looks like it's in italics, from matching gift employer. And so that's another thing that you're going to be searching for when you're digging for employment information. There is usually a landing page on a company's public website that talks about their employee contribution plan and whether or not the company itself is philanthropic outside of that. Because another thing that you're going to want to do when you find out that Rachel is employed at ING or whatever is, can you turn that person into an internal corporate champion? Can she reach out to other people that work at that company and come together and give to your organization? That usually works based upon affinity to a shared alma mater, but There are lots of organizations that sort of have an annual day of giving or an annual day of volunteerism, and there's no reason why that day couldn't be spent with your organization. There's just ask. And then to put a finer point on Elaine's comments about the level at which you solicit a gift, you shouldn't feel bad about asking for a stretch gift or coming right out of the chute and asking for a principal gift. Not only will that be the expectation of very sophisticated donors, surely you've done your homework. You know that I made this transformational gift at organization X. I can do the same for Y, so why wouldn't you ask me for the same amount? But also, this is about record keeping. If you asked them for $10,000 in 2013 and they weren't able to make it, but they gave you a $5,000 contribution, and then in 2014 it was $7,500, today's the day that you ask them for the $10,000. And if they still can't make it, that's fine. You're keeping record of the fact that you're stretching them to this gift, and $10,000 is sort of the level at which they're at. And then when you have a fundraiser or a board member who keeps returning to you saying, they can do more, they can do more, you can present them with the donor file and say, we know they have the capacity, we've been asking them to do more, and yet they continually aren't able to meet that threshold. So you're armed with information. That's what you want to do, is ensure that everything is data-driven and that your records are also a research tool for your own shop.
We do have a question from online. The question is, in your experience, have you found that a combination of these strategies result in reliable information?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
She goes on to say, we use Blackbaud Research Point for our prospecting.
Good.
Many, but not all of these resources discussed here are used in that search. Is it useful to visit the sites themselves in addition to the web wealth search done by Research Point?
This is a great question, and I'm so excited that you have Research Point. Research Point, iWave, Wealth Engine, there's lots of vendors out there, and email me, call me, private message me, whatever. We can talk about that if you want some recommendations and you want to know what my experience has been. Funnily enough, we don't have Research Point at Drake. I have experience with it from my time at the ISU Foundation. So even though we use Blackbaud Razor's Edge, we use Wealth Engine. And I refer to all of those vendors as sort of data aggregators. They're awesome to have. If you have it in your budget, go get one, particularly if you're interested in stepping up your shop to the next level. They're sophisticated, but you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. And the reason that I'm saying that is every now and then you will find bad information based on an old address or a very generic name, historical information. All of that's included, even though it may be out of date. So to answer your question directly, yes. And the reason that you're going to want to go out to these publicly available resources is you're looking to corroborate the information that the aggregator has given you. I can't tell you the number of times that we have uncovered a new prospect and we're using the address that's been given to us out of Wealth Engine or Razor's Edge. And because those aggregators are relying upon a public assessor's website, they haven't noticed that the home has recently been sold. But Zillow has that, or Trulia has it, or Redfin has it. So it's great to start with an aggregated report of research. The information is going to be accurate. You just need to watch out for when it's historical or when you've had an incorrect hit. There's usually a QOM score right next to any information or data point, and that's quality of match. And that's usually on a scale from accurate to most accurate to least accurate. So pay attention if you don't have the time to go out and validate the information yourself to what that quality of match is telling you. Even when you pay top dollar for a screening of all of your records because you want to come away with Blackbaud's best estimation of what you should be asking for gifts at. You know, you're going to be looking for a wealth capacity rating. In both my positions, research positions at Drake and Iowa State, I've spent significant time validating that data. And normally you're looking for 3/4 of the records in your database to have a hit. That would be nice. Junk in, junk out, right? If you have a data integrity issue, there's going to be an issue with what the vendors are able to provide you. But yes, public resources are there to ensure that your information is up to date and validated.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here.
Great.
Do you know how, let me go back up here. Do you know how to get to who the individual donor is when a gift comes through a company's, like Principal Financial, distribution through a trust?
Truist.
Truist? Yeah, it is Truist. Thank you.
Well, it depends. We actually deal with this issue a lot because of community foundation contributions. And you have to be careful because organizations can't be used, particularly community foundations can't be pass-throughs, right? You can't give money to a community foundation and then expressly direct where it's going. You can talk about what you care about and where your affinities are, and you can come up with your own personal philanthropy plan. But for example, it is illegal to pay off pledges with community foundation dollars. So you can designate, I want the remainder of my community foundation funds to go to Drake University, or put that into your will, or what have you. But they couldn't, donor X couldn't come to Drake and say, I'm going to give you $100,000 for your new capital campaign, and then have that pledge paid off with community foundation contributions. So what I'm trying to get at is that it's very important to have a solid working relationship with the organizations and foundations that are making contributions to your organization, because it's amazing how much can be solved by a phone call. You're going to want to talk to that corporate giving officer. You're going to want to talk to your contact at the community foundation. But reverse engineering, if I understand the question, reverse engineering where an employee made a contribution that was a corporate match, you're usually going to have to pay attention to how the check comes in and where the match comes in, and that's more of a records issue and less of a research issue. But as long as you're looking through 990s for a particular foundation, even if it's the foundational arm of a corporation, it's going to be nearly impossible to determine one specific person's contribution to that foundation, which was then dispersed to your organization. But again, it's all about picking up the phone and talking to that foundation relations officer and seeing if they're able to tell you, who are your stars, who should we be talking to, or how can we, who are the change makers in your organization that we can talk to.
Here's another one. Truist, I think, is an aggregator for large corporations to distribute their employee gifts.
Yep.
It's more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
Other questions that anyone here has? Well, Rachel, thank you for 2.0. It's been very helpful today.
My pleasure.
Just a reminder, we do webinars once a month. Next month we have The Dizzying Dance of Designations by Randy Fox. Randy is our philanthropic advisor at our Chicago office, and he'll be helping us understand what those designations or those initials after people's names mean, and what that means to you as a fundraiser or to your donors as their client, and how that might be useful in the arena of plans giving and giving in general. So hopefully we'll see all of you then. I know it falls on at least a spring break for some of our institutions, but as a reminder, we do record all of the sessions that we do. They're available out on YouTube, and if you participate either in person or via webinar, we do send you the presentations in the next couple of days. So hopefully everybody's going to have a great rest of the week, and that it's warming up in your part of the country. I know here in Iowa it's a balmy 31 degrees today, and people are thinking it's wonderful. So I hope wherever you're at, it's warm. Have a great rest of the week.